Hi there, I'm Fox 13 meteorologist Nash Rhodes, and welcome to Sky Tower Weather Now. This is a special edition as we're going to be keeping tabs on the tropics, specifically Milton, which has formed as a tropical storm in the western Gulf and will be slowly drifting toward the west coast of Florida over the next few days. I want to show you what we're looking at here on my latest forecast maps. Notice with enhanced satellite imagery, the big cluster of thunderstorms that has developed really over the past 24 hours down there. Enhanced satellite imagery very keen on showing the vigorous thunderstorm activity toward the center of, again, what is now a growing tropical storm with sustained winds of 40 miles per hour. This has been a big switch up from what we were talking about yesterday. If you remember tuning in about 2 days ago, we were even looking at this area thinking that it would be slow to develop and then large amounts of wind shear would likely have their way with the system, keeping it a little bit weak. It's looking increasingly likely that's not going to be the case because of how quickly this system formed, and now all of the forecast models are beginning to play catch up with it and are starting to consolidate on what the solution would be. And unfortunately, that's leaning toward a slightly stronger storm. Enhanced satellite imagery showing, and of course the latest updated advisory also showing strong winds around what is now again a tropical storm. That's what allowed us to classify this as Milton. And Milton is expected to continue to track to the east after taking a bit of a turn over the next few days and then drift back to the north and east. The latest advisory as of 5 p.m. bumping up the expected winds on a potential landfall there somewhere along the west coast of Florida to a Category 3 storm. This is not a surprise. In the last forecast, they even verbally said in their discussion that they would be watching this to be near or at major hurricane status as it approaches the west coast of Florida. For us, we will be watching for the potential for more damaging hurricane and tropical storm force winds with this system as we head into Wednesday, and perhaps some of those winds arriving as early as Tuesday. As this swings through the state and pushes out to the other side, it will weaken and then have another opportunity to potentially maintain hurricane status, but we're more focused on our immediate impacts. Storm surge, again, another concern, and I know we don't want to talk about this, but we have to. As we head into Wednesday, and this is potentially making landfall, we will be looking toward the south side of the storm and areas also close to the center to see the potential again for storm surge with this particular system. Latest forecast doing a good job of showing that rapid intensification, although that forecast is showing a lot of possible solutions with that potential track. And we'll jump back to that and go over that in just a moment. Milton's forecast model plots showing a wide array of solutions spanning from the Big Bend area down to the southern tip of the peninsula, and one outlier that just swings it down into Mexico. We're not going to pay much attention to that because it's very much a one-off. These others continue to consolidate somewhere along the western Gulf Coast of Florida, and most of these solutions, a pattern I've at least noticed, is the stronger ones have remained a little bit more displaced to the north, and the weaker ones have trended a little bit farther south. That would be more toward southwest Florida for reference. Milton's forecast model plots highlight that we still don't exactly know where this will track, and any little bend and twist in the forecast would change the impacts we would receive. I want to point out by zooming in here just how wide this forecast cone is. And if you're not familiar, after we've tracked several storms, the forecast cone only tells us where the potential center of a system would head next. And notice this one has about a 360 mile wide cone of uncertainty attached with it. It's much larger than what we saw with the initial forecast from Helene because, again, a little bit of uncertainty, not just with where this is going to go, but the strength of it as it gets there. Most models do have a hurricane and potentially a strong major hurricane heading our way into Tuesday and Wednesday, and that's what we will need to prepare for. And when I say heading our way, of course, I'm specifically talking about the west coast of Florida, with impacts extending a little bit farther inland than what we saw from Helene, just because of the angle of approach of this system. You see the forecast model plots immediately bringing this into inland zones of Florida rather than skimming up our coastline like what we saw with Helene. Back to another tool that we've been looking at, it's that wind shear. We also discussed the potential for wind shear to play a big role in attempting to weaken this system. You see a lot of it displaced up here to the north. I'm going to circle it. Those dark red and orange shadings on your screen showing spots where winds are very strong in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And occasionally that can weaken a hurricane as it's trying to get organized and form. This is more what it's like. You see it kind of gets knocked off kilter, off balance, and you typically get more ugly looking storms that are a bit more disorganized whenever you have high shear. In this storm's case, it looks more likely to develop just south of that big pocket of wind shear, and that's going to allow it to be unique from the front to its north and basically create its own environment, allowing it to organize a little bit more quickly and a little bit more symmetrically. It is still going to be influenced by that shear to its north, but this is kind of the change up from what we saw versus yesterday's models in today's runs. It looks more and more likely this is going to strengthen south of that frontal boundary, with most of that strong shear remaining just to its north. That little white dot there on your screen, that drop in pressure being picked up by the American forecast model, showing this staying south of that shear for the most part. But as we head into Wednesday, it gets a little bit closer, and that could attempt to weaken the storm as it gets near the coast of Florida. We will see. More likely than not, because this will have time to strengthen, it's not going to have enough time to weaken substantially, and we are still looking at a hurricane approaching us into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. The National Hurricane Center again estimating that time of arrival likely to be heading into Wednesday for the west coast of Florida. Water temperatures in that area are in the mid to upper 80s. And I know a lot of you are wondering, with Helene churning up the waters, has that not brought up a lot of cooler waters to the surface? It did indeed cool down water temperatures a tiny bit, but unfortunately we are still at a surplus as far as above average water temperatures there in the Gulf of Mexico, and it really wasn't enough. This is going to be primed for a hurricane to develop, and that's why we're watching for this to strengthen from a tropical storm into a hurricane. As far as impacts go, it is too early to get into the nitty-gritty with storm surge and the exact wind strength that your community will receive from this, barring the direction that it ultimately takes. What we can get into are the rainfall totals, because this is going to be a multi-day event. Beginning tomorrow, heavy rains are going to start from an area of disturbed weather out ahead of this system, and that rain is going to keep on falling intermittently from Sunday through Monday into Tuesday. In the next 7 days, rainfall totals could surpass 3 to 4 inches in many spots across central and south Florida, with deep tropical moisture continuing to track ahead of this system and with this system. This is that area I'm talking about out ahead of the storm that we're watching to churn up more of our thunderstorms here. A broad area of low pressure that's going to track across the Florida peninsula, exiting off to the other side and bringing with it all that deep tropical moisture and churning up more showers and storms with it. That's going to bump up our rain chances again starting tomorrow through Monday into Tuesday, and then with the storm behind it, depending on how it's going to arrive, we will see if Milton continues to increase our local rain chances, as it's looking more and more likely that it will. I've reflected that in the 7-day forecast. Percentages of rain going up now to 70% starting tomorrow and continuing through Wednesday. Thursday, specifically Thursday morning, we will still be dealing with potentially some rain showers left behind from this system, depending on how close to us it tracks. And then into Friday and Saturday, we start to clear out the forecast, dropping those highs to the mid-80s and bringing those rain chances down to about 10 to 20%. Again, all of this very much subject to change as we continue to pin down the exact forecast of this system. But if you take anything away from this, just note it is going to be wet over the next few days, and we will be watching specifically on Wednesday for a potential landfalling hurricane, with many of our forecast models developing that into a major hurricane. We'll have more updates on this storm as well as your local forecast. I know many people are interested in the details about the rain and even the showers that we're anticipating for today. I'll have all that and more coming right up.